Hello and welcome to Red Read. Today I want to talk about In Dreams, the very short stories of Ryūnosuke Akutagawa. This is translated by Ryan Choi. It's actually Ryan Choi's translator's debut, which is a cool idea. I like that instead of feeling daunted at having to kind of break into the scene, doing a new translation of in a bamboo grove or something like that, you kind of find lesser known vignettes, short stories, even there's a couple of plays in here, they're very short, and making a compilation or a collection of those. It's a really cool idea and I really enjoyed the experience of reading them. I wanted to make a video just giving some examples and talking about it because although I can say that I do recommend it, I wouldn't recommend this as a way of getting into Akutagawa, which is almost a shame because of how easy it is to read, and it is nearly a 200-page collection, but because the font is really big and also it's like bite-sized snippets, you probably could read this in a day. However, I don't think that this collection would have the best impact if you didn't already know Akutagawa's work, and especially if you didn't already know Akutagawa's life. Of course, he was like the father of the Japanese short story, as per Haruki Murakami, but also he had a very unfortunate and a tormented life. Almost archetypal tormented poet. He was always afraid that he would inherit schizophrenia from his mother. In his early 30s, he committed suicide, and at the end of his life, he wrote a couple of just really gut-wrenching stories that are quite hard to read. And the two most incredible ones are The Diary of a Stupid Man, which is sort of 20 or a collection of moments of extreme poetic intensity in an artist's life, just spread over the course of his 30 years. And then there's Spinning Gears, which is just 2 days in the mind of a person who is suffering really intensely from mental illness. And so the interesting thing about reading in dreams is, of course, you're reading short stories, but you're also reading vignettes, which just feel like the sort of journal entries that come from people with these with this artistic sensibility that I get a similar impression when I see snippets or extracts of Sylvia Plath's journals. But I think that it can help, and this collection can help provide a more multi-dimensional image, or even just a bit more depth in how Akutagawa felt and how he was channeling a lot of his stuff through art, but it's not necessarily the piece that I would recommend you get first before you've read his major short stories, or even before you've read Kappa. You will still get kind of great short stories. He wrote a lot of this. It seems like he was trying to write proverbial tales or even fables. Some of the ones, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from his short story Frogs, which is a fun kind of biting almost satire of this trying to find a religious justification for why we exist in the world. And just to give you a taste of how his writing is in these lesser known stories, and also how his writing comes through in translation, here's the first couple of paragraphs from Frogs. Surrounded by frogs, I lay by the old pond, its rim grown thick with cattails and reeds, above whose tips the trimmed heads of the poplar trees on the roadside rustled below the clouds glazed like polished glass. Reflected in the pond, this summer scene was imbued with silent beauty, more potent than summer itself. Initially, the croaking of the frogs sounded like nonsense, until I listened to them carefully and realized their croaks were not gibberish, but words in fierce debate. By no means is it a fable to say that Aesop's talking frogs still exist. One frog came to dominate the rest. Perched on the highest leaf of the tallest reed, he pontificated in the manner of a professor. And why does water exist? The water exists for us to swim in, he proclaimed. And why do the insects exist? The insects exist for us to eat. And you can imagine where it goes. It kind of just progresses on and on. Something I liked, just a quick little thing. The first paragraph feels like distinctly Japanese, because I'm thinking frogs old pond, like that haiku from Basho is just flashing in your brain. And then we have the frogs talking, frogs start talking in the second paragraph, and we immediately reference Aesop's talking frogs. So we kind of have a Oriental to an Occidental jump. And yeah, I just thought that was a clever way of leading into the fable, and it's got a predictable payoff, which you can imagine. But coming from knowing Akutagawa's kind of developing interest in Christianity and moving away from some of the Japanese mentality and the philosophy. Again, a lot of these stories are not the ones that I'd recommend you first experience of Akutagawa, but they will flesh out his perspective. One paragraph, this is from a short story called Eastern Autumn. I was walking through Hibiya Park under a shroud of mist. The sky was shingled with clouds. A blue fringe sat on the horizon above the trees. It was almost evening. The path through the forest was coated in dew. The sands, stones, and wilted grass, even the tangles of plain tree branches, the shadows of their yellow leaves blurring with the first twilight gleaming in the dew. I was the only person on the path. I maintained a brisk pace with my cane tucked under my arm, cigar butt between my lips. The branches crisscrossing above me rained down yellow leaves. In the distance, I heard the echoes of a fountain burbling as if it had been there for centuries, while the din from the surrounding town erupted as though from blustery waters, softening to a lull on its way to the lonely canopy above me. In the heart of the forest was an old pond, where there were cranes whose cries sometimes muffled the tender sounds of the fountain. One of the stories I liked, not because it's necessarily that good, but because I thought it was interesting to see a story in this form, is called The Parrot Notes on the Great Earthquake. And it starts with a little kind of note from the author saying, "The following, as the reader shall see, are unedited notes. I have left them as is, as I did not have the time or the emotional means to do anything more. However, even in rough form, these words are not without value." And the cool thing is that we have a short story that is not written in prose. It is just small fragments of words with M dashes or N dashes leading into just a general string of how the story would be put together. And I thought it was cool to read, especially after having read his great short stories, because it can help if you have a writer's sentiment. It can help kind of break that picturesque perspective of, what I see is like the first time you see a short story and it's perfect, it's because you're experiencing it as a reader. But if you're experiencing it as a writer, I know that we obviously say like things go through drafts and things and so on and so forth, but it can be a little bit disheartening when if you've all the time you read these great works and they're just brilliant from the first moment you see them, and so when you start trying to write, if it's not brilliant straight away, you think, oh, I'm not as good as them. But seeing a work like this that is just, he just writes people in frenzy, dash, mountains of bags, dash, no time to search, dash, he sees a middle-aged lady with her caged canary, dash, dressed like a brothel madam, dash, blah, blah, blah. It can be really kind of educational to read a story like this from someone who you already know has obviously he can make great, brilliant masterpieces. There are some especially brutal ones, so this is something that maybe it's almost kind of left out or even dejecta from his story Spinning Gears, but there's one that's called Notes on Delirium, and it's just 5 entries. And I'll read a couple of them. Number 1, my stomach is a whale. A whale, they say, Columbus has seen. Sometimes it spouts salt water for days on end. Those voices wailing, I'm sick of them. And then number 4 is, when my stomach rumbles, it feels like I'm giving birth to baby sharks. And the last one, when depression ails me, it feels like lice squirming in the folds of my brain. There's a short story called 20 Remarks on China, which reminded me of The Diary of a Stupid Man, although it's not internalized, it's kind of externalized, but it has that same poetic, that kind of same poetic intensity. So this is number 4. It's called Loot Platform. On the rim of the moonlit lake, a petite geisha at the railings with her bangs undone. Raising a pink fan aloft, she broods on the black and glistening clouded waters beyond the thinning reeds, the sacred lotuses parked on the shore. And then this is Zhongzhou. Two pigtails dangling from the grand willow on main tree, clusters of bluebottle flies gliding them like glass beads. Where did the heads of the criminals go? Did they fall and rot, get eaten by the dogs? So yeah, that's kind of all I'm going to say. It's a short collection. If you're already a fan of Akutagawa, I recommend reading it. If you haven't read anything by Akutagawa, I have a couple of videos that I recommend. One is on Rashomon and other stories. The other is on Kappa. If you want a cool little insight, then yeah, you can go and watch those videos. But also, if I've made a video on something, I recommend reading it anyway. So I would recommend just going in blind, especially if you liked some of the extracts that I've read from here. Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.